The cantina was dark and filled with smoke. Strange music played from hidden speakers, while aliens from different worlds sat at tables, drinking and talking quietly. Most kept to themselves. This was Nexus Prime, a trade station where no government had power. Here, anyone could come and go without questions. Juan sat across from the alien veteran, trying not to stare at the deep scars that covered the creature's shell-like body. The alien had 4 arms, each ending in sharp claws. His name was Crixtal, and he belonged to a race called the Veltari. Beside Juan sat Nixara, his research partner. She was also an alien, with blue skin and large eyes that never seemed to blink. Crixtal's hands shook as he held his drink. The liquid inside glowed green, and steam rose from the glass. He had agreed to this meeting, but now he seemed afraid to speak. Other aliens in the cantina had warned them earlier. "Don't ask about the war," an old trader had said. "Some stories should stay buried." But Juan needed this story. He was a journalist who collected accounts of the Great War that had ended 15 years ago. The war between humans and the Galactic Coalition. Most people called it the Human War, but those who fought in it had different names for it. Names they whispered in dark places like this cantina. "You want to know about fighting humans?" Crixtal finally said. His voice was rough, like rocks grinding together. "You think it will make a good story for your readers?" Juan nodded. "People need to know what happened. The official records don't tell the whole truth." Crixtal made a sound that might have been laughter, but it held no joy. "Official records. They say we won great victories. They say humans were a minor threat that we dealt with quickly." He took a long drink. "They lie." The veteran's eyes, which were large and golden, stared at nothing. "I was young then. Younger than you are now. The Coalition military was the strongest force in the galaxy. We had conquered 847 worlds. We had 12 different species working together. Our fleets could block out the stars." He paused and looked directly at Juan. "Do you know how many worlds humans controlled when we first met them?" Juan shook his head. "1. Just one world, Earth. They had some colonies on nearby planets, but nothing like an empire. We thought they would be easy." Crixtal's claws scratched the metal table. "We had done this so many times before. Show up with overwhelming force. Demand surrender. Accept the new species into the Coalition as servants. Simple." Nixara leaned forward. "What went wrong?" Crixtal was quiet for a long time. Around them, the cantina continued its normal business. Traders made deals, smugglers planned routes, and everyone pretended not to listen to their conversation. "Humans," Crixtal said finally. "Humans went wrong. They broke every rule we knew about how wars should work." He began to tell his story, speaking slowly as if each word was painful. "I was a junior soldier in the 47th Assault Fleet. We were part of the final solution. That's what the commanders called our mission. The largest military force ever assembled by the Coalition. Over 10,000 ships, millions of soldiers. We were going to end human resistance once and for all." Crixtal's voice grew stronger as he spoke, as if telling the story was helping him remember how to use words. The plan was perfect. We would surround Earth and its colonies, cut off their supply lines, force them to surrender to save their people. Standard procedure. It had worked every time before. He stopped talking and stared at his drink again. "But," Juan prompted, "but humans don't think like other species. When we arrived at Earth with our massive fleet, when we sent our demand for immediate surrender, when we gave them 24 hours to decide, do you know what they said?" Both Juan and Nixara waited. "They said no." Crixtal's voice was almost a whisper. "Just no. Not we need time to think, or let us negotiate terms, or please don't hurt our people. Just no." The alien veteran finished his drink and signaled for another. The server, a mechanical droid, brought it quickly and left without speaking. Admiral Velsharn was in command of our fleet. He had conquered 37 worlds before Earth. He was confused by the human response. "Perhaps they don't understand," he said. "Send the message again. Make sure they know how many ships we have." Krixtal's new drink arrived, but he didn't touch it, so we sent the message again. We showed them recordings of our previous victories. We explained exactly what would happen if they refused to surrender. We even offered them generous terms. They could keep their culture, their families would be safe, they would have good positions in the coalition. The veteran's forearms moved restlessly, as if he was still trying to understand something that had happened long ago. The humans sent back a single message. It was broadcast on every frequency they had. Every human ship, every human colony, every human outpost in the galaxy received it at the same time. "What did it say?" Nixara asked. "It was just 2 words, Krixtal said. 2 words that changed everything." "Come on," Juan felt confused. "Come on? That's all?" "You have to understand," Krixtal explained. "In those 2 words, we heard something we had never heard before. Not fear, not anger, not desperation, challenge. They were challenging us, all of us, the entire coalition. They knew they couldn't win, but they were going to fight anyway." The veteran finally picked up his new drink, but his hands were shaking worse now. "That was when we should have left," he said. "That was when someone should have realized that humans were different. That maybe species who refuse to surrender when facing certain death might be more dangerous than we thought." Krixtal looked around the cantina, as if checking to make sure no one was listening too closely. "But we didn't leave. We attacked. And that attack, that was the beginning of the end for the coalition. We just didn't know it yet." The alien was quiet for several minutes. Juan wanted to ask more questions, but something in Krixtal's expression warned him to wait. 15 years, the veteran finally said. 15 years I've kept this story inside me. Do you know why I'm telling it now?" Juan shook his head. Krixtal reached into a pouch on his belt and pulled out a small device. He pressed a button, and a hologram appeared above the table. It showed a human woman with kind eyes, standing with 2 small children. Her name was Mira, Krixtal said quietly. "I met her during the war. She was 6 years old then." He paused. "I almost killed her." The hologram flickered and changed, showing the same woman as a child, looking up with wide, frightened eyes. "But I didn't kill her. And now she has children. Of her own. She sent me this message last week. She said it was time for people to know the truth about what happened. All of it. The good and the bad." Krixtal turned off the hologram and put the device away. "So I'm going to tell you everything. About the war. About what humans did to us. About what we did to them. About how a single species with 1 world brought down an empire that had lasted for 1,000 years." He looked directly at Juan with those large golden eyes. "But first, you need to understand something. This isn't a story about heroes and villains. This is a story about what happens when different kinds of people meet, and neither side truly understands the other." Krixtal picked up his drink again, steadier now. "Are you ready to hear how everything changed?" Krixtal stared into his drink as he began to remember the early days. The cantina around them seemed to fade away as he spoke. "First contact with humans happened by accident," he said. "Our scout ship was exploring new systems when they found Earth. It was supposed to be a simple survey mission, count the population, check their technology level, see if they had anything valuable." He paused to take a sip of his glowing drink. The scout captain was named Zethric. He was a careful officer, very by the book. When he saw Earth, he followed standard procedure. Send a greeting message, wait for response, begin formal contact protocols. Krixtal's claws tapped against the table as he spoke. Humans responded, quickly. Too quickly, Zethric thought. Most new species take days or weeks to figure out how to communicate with us. Humans had a response ready in less than 6 hours, in our language. Juan leaned forward. They learned your language in 6 hours? No, Krixtal said. They already knew it. Somehow they had been listening to our communications for years. Learning our languages, studying our technology, watching our ships from far away. We didn't know any of this at the time. The alien veteran's expression grew darker. The first human who spoke to us was a diplomat named Ambassador Park. She was polite, friendly, asked all the right questions. Welcome to our system, she said. We're honored to meet you. What can we do to help? Krixtal made that grinding sound again, the one that might have been laughter. Zethric was pleased. Here was a species that understood proper behavior. They would be easy to integrate into the coalition. He began explaining how things worked, how humans would need to accept coalition authority, how their world would be managed by coalition officials, how their resources would be shared with other coalition worlds. The veteran stopped talking and stared at nothing for a moment. Ambassador Park listened to everything very carefully. She asked good questions about coalition law, about how other species were treated, about what would happen to human culture and families. Zethric thought she was just being thorough. Nyx's aura shifted in her seat. What was she really doing? Buying time, Krixtal said. While she kept Zethric talking, humans all over their system were preparing, moving ships, hiding weapons, evacuating civilians. But we didn't know that either. The alien took another drink, and his voice became more serious. After 3 days of talks, Ambassador Park said humans needed time to discuss the coalition's offer with their leaders. She was still very polite. This is a big decision for our people, she said. We want to make sure we understand everything correctly. Krixtal's 4 arms moved restlessly. Zethric gave them a week to think about joining the coalition. That was generous. Most species get 3 days. But Ambassador Park had been so reasonable, so friendly. Why wouldn't humans want to join? The veteran's voice grew quieter. That week changed everything. When humans finally gave their answer, it wasn't just Ambassador Park speaking. It was a human called President Kim, and his message was broadcast to the entire galaxy. Krixtal stopped talking completely. He just sat there, staring at his drink. What did President Kim say? Juan asked. He thanked us for the offer, Krixtal said slowly. He said humans appreciated the chance to learn about the coalition. He explained that humans had studied our history, our laws, our treatment of other species. The alien veteran's claws scratched the table again. And then he said no. But not just no. He explained why. He talked about freedom, about the right of people to choose their own future. He said humans would rather die than live as servants. Krixtal looked up at Juan with those large golden eyes. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what he said next. We know this means war, President Kim said. We know we can't win against the coalition's military power. But we're going to fight anyway. And we're going to keep fighting until we can't fight anymore. The cantina suddenly felt very quiet, even though the other customers were still talking and drinking. Zethric couldn't believe what he was hearing, Krixtal continued. He sent another message. You don't understand, he told them. The coalition has thousands of ships, millions of soldiers. You have one planet. This isn't a war you can win. The veteran's voice became even quieter. President Kim's response came back. In 10 minutes, just 7 words. Then you'd better bring more ships. Krixtal finished his second drink and sat back in his chair. That was when Coalition Command decided to make an example of humans. Send a large fleet to Earth. Show other species what happens when you refuse to join the coalition. Quick, clean, decisive action. The alien shook his head slowly. They chose Admiral Velsharn to lead the operation. He had never lost a battle. His fleets had conquered 37 worlds without a single major casualty. He was confident this would be the same. Krixtal's voice became bitter. The Admiral studied human history while his fleet traveled to Earth. He learned about human wars, their weapons, their tactics. "Interesting," he said after reading the reports. "They fight each other a lot, but their technology is primitive. Their ships are slow. Their weapons are weak. This should be over quickly." The veteran looked around the cantina again as if checking for listeners. What Admiral Velsharn didn't understand was that humans had been preparing for this war their entire existence, not preparing to fight us specifically. They didn't know we existed until first contact. "But preparing to fight someone," Nixara frowned. "What do you mean?" "Human history is different from other species," Krixtal explained. "Most species develop space travel, then meet neighbors, then either fight or cooperate. Humans developed space travel while constantly fighting each other. They went to the stars already knowing how to make war." The alien veteran's expression grew sad. When Admiral Velsharn arrived at Earth with his fleet, he expected to find a frightened, desperate species ready to surrender. Instead, he found humans who had spent the last month preparing to die. Krixtal was quiet for a moment. Every human military installation had been moved or hidden. Every civilian population had been evacuated to deep shelters. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier was ready for battle. And in the middle of it all was Earth itself, a blue planet that looked peaceful and beautiful from space. The veteran's claws drummed against the table. Admiral Velsharn sent his final demand for surrender. He explained exactly what his fleet could do to Earth. He showed recordings of previous coalition victories. He gave humans 12 hours to decide. Krixtal looked directly at Juan. The response came back in 12 minutes. It was a single transmission from Earth, broadcast on every frequency. Just music. A human song called "We Shall Overcome." No words, no threats, no desperate pleas. Just music. The alien veteran's voice was barely a whisper now. That was when Admiral Velsharn realized he wasn't fighting a normal war. He was fighting something completely different, something the Coalition had never encountered before. Krixtal stared at his empty glass. "And that was when I learned the first lesson about fighting humans. They don't fight to win. They fight because they refuse to lose." Krixtal ordered another drink before continuing his story. His hands were steadier now, as if talking about these memories was helping him find some kind of peace. "The first real battle of the war was at Luna Base," he said. "That's what humans called their military station on Earth's moon. It was supposed to be easy. Our intelligence said maybe 2,000 human soldiers were stationed there. We sent 15,000 coalition troops." The veteran's golden eyes stared past Juan and Nixara, seeing something from long ago. "I was part of the assault force. Just a junior soldier then, following orders, believing everything our commanders told us." "This will be over in a few hours," they said. "Humans can't possibly hold out against our superior numbers and technology." Krixtal's voice became harder. Luna. Base was built inside a mountain on the moon's surface, one way in, one way out, perfect for a siege. We surrounded the entire facility with our best troops and heavy weapons. No one could escape. No supplies could get in. All we had to do was wait for them to surrender. He paused to drink, and Juan noticed the alien's hands were starting to shake again. The base commander was a human female named Captain Lee. She was young for such an important position, probably only 30 human years old. Our psychological experts said she would crack under pressure quickly. Young commanders always do. Krixtal made that grinding sound that might have been laughter. Captain Lee sent us a message on the first day. She thanked us for surrounding her base, said it would make things more interesting. Our commanders thought she was trying to sound brave to boost her troops' morale. The alien veteran's expression grew dark. On the second day, we offered terms. Surrender now, and all human personnel would be treated well as prisoners of war. Captain Lee's response was broadcast to our entire fleet. She said her people had voted and they chose to keep fighting. Krixtal's claws scraped the table. Voted. They voted on whether to surrender or die. What kind of military does that? Nixara leaned forward. What happened next? We cut their power, Krixtal said simply. No electricity, no lights, no heat. The moon is cold. Without power, they should have frozen in a few days. Instead, they jury-rigged thermal generators from their weapon systems. Somehow, they kept the base warm enough to survive. The veteran took another drink. So we cut their water supply. Humans need water more than most species. They should have dehydrated quickly. Instead, they started recycling everything, even their own. He paused, looking uncomfortable. They recycled bodily waste into drinking water. Our soldiers couldn't believe it. Krixtal's voice became quieter. Then we cut their food supply. This had to work. Living beings can't survive without nutrition. But humans started eating things we didn't think were edible. Leather from their equipment. Paste made from processed fiber. They even grew some kind of plant in small containers, using artificial lights powered by their improvised generators. The alien shook his head slowly. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of siege, and they were still fighting, still sending us daily messages of defiance. Captain Lee broadcast a report every morning at the same time. Luna base operational, she would say. Morale high. Send more enemies. Krixtal's 4 arms moved restlessly. Our casualties were mounting. Every time we tried to assault the base entrance, humans turned it into a killing ground. They had set up overlapping fields of fire, improvised explosives, even traps made from their own broken equipment. The veteran's voice became strained. The worst part was how they fought. Most species, when they're losing badly, become desperate. They make mistakes, take foolish risks, break under pressure. Humans became more calm, more focused, more dangerous. He stared at his drink without picking it up. I remember one assault, where we almost reached the main entrance. Human soldiers were falling back, running low on ammunition. We thought we had them. Then a single human appeared at the entrance, a young male, maybe 20 years old. He was wounded, bleeding, could barely stand. Krixtal's voice was barely audible, but he just stood there, blocking the entrance with his body. He didn't have any weapons left, couldn't fight anymore. He just stood there and wouldn't move. Our soldiers, we couldn't get past him. Not because he was strong or dangerous, but because something about the way he stood there, ready to die rather than step aside, it confused us. The alien looked up at Juan. Do you understand? We had superior numbers, better weapons, more experience, but we couldn't get past one wounded human who refused to move. Krixtal finally picked up his drink, but his hands were shaking badly now. The siege lasted 73 days. 73 days of humans doing impossible things just to survive. One more day. By the end, they had no power, no water, no food, and almost no ammunition. They were fighting with knives and improvised weapons. The veteran's voice cracked. On the last day, Captain Lee sent her final message. She said her people were proud to serve humanity. She said they had done their duty. She asked only that someone remember their names. Krixtal was quiet for a long time. We finally broke into the base on day 74. Do you know what we found? Neither Juan nor Nixara answered. 37 humans still alive. 37 out of the original 2,000. They had held off our assault for over 10 weeks. Every single one of them was wounded. Most could barely stand. But when we entered their command center, they were still at their posts. The alien veteran's voice became very small. Captain Lee was sitting in her command chair. She had been shot multiple times during the final assault, but she was still alive, still conscious. When she saw us, she tried to stand up to surrender properly. Krixtal's claws were leaving scratches on the metal table. Our commander, Major Thexlar, walked up to her. He was angry. We had lost over 4,000 soldiers, taking this base. Was it worth it? He asked her. All this death for nothing? The veteran looked directly at Juan with those large golden eyes. Captain Lee looked at him and smiled. Actually smiled. You took 73 days to capture one small base with 37 defenders, she said. We have thousands of bases. Millions of defenders. Yes, it was worth it. Krikstal finished his drink in one swallow. That was when I understood what we were really fighting. Not just human soldiers or human weapons or human technology. We were fighting human will. And human will doesn't break the way other things break. The alien veteran's voice became bitter. Major Thexlar sent a report to Admiral Velsharn. Mission accomplished, he wrote. Luna base captured. But he didn't mention the cost. He didn't mention how long it took. He didn't mention that every other human base in the system had used those 73 days to prepare even better defenses. Krikstal looked around the cantina, as if seeing it for the first time. After Luna base, everything changed. The humans had shown the entire galaxy that the mighty coalition could be fought, could be made to bleed. Other species started asking questions, started wondering if they had to accept coalition rule forever. The veteran's voice became very quiet, but we didn't understand that yet. We thought Luna base was just one difficult battle. We thought the rest of the war would be easier. He looked at Juan with sad eyes. We were wrong. Krikstal's fourth drink arrived, but he ignored it. His golden eyes had taken on a distant look, as if he was seeing ghosts from the past. 6 months into the war, he began, we started finding things that shouldn't exist. Modified coalition, weapons in human hands, technology that worked better than when we had built it. The alien veteran's voice was steady, but Juan could see the tension in his 4 arms. The first time was on a human colony called New Busan. We had been fighting there for weeks, trying to clear out human resistance. Standard urban warfare. Go building by building, room by room. Slow, dangerous work. Krikstal's claws tapped against the table in a nervous rhythm. My squad was clearing a residential building when we came under fire from the roof. Nothing unusual about that. Humans always tried to hold the high ground. But the sound was wrong. The plasma blasts were coming too fast. He paused, picking up his drink with shaking hands. Coalition plasma rifles have a built-in safety system. They can only fire once every 3 seconds to prevent overheating. It's built into the core programming. Impossible to change without completely rebuilding the weapon. The veteran took a small sip and set the glass down carefully. But the human on that roof was firing once every second. Same type of rifle we used, same plasma signature, but firing 3 times faster than our engineers said was possible. Nixara frowned. How? We didn't know, Krikstal said. After we cleared the building, we found the weapon. It looked like one of ours from the outside, but inside, he shook his head. Inside, it had been completely rebuilt. Different cooling system, modified power coupling, new firing mechanism. It should have exploded the first time someone tried to use it. The alien's voice became more strained. But it worked perfectly. Better than perfectly. More accurate, more powerful, more reliable than the original design. Our own engineers couldn't figure out how humans had done it. Krikstal stared at his drink without touching it. That was just the beginning. Every week we found more impossible things. Human ships that moved faster than their engines should allow. Human armor that stopped weapons it wasn't designed to stop. Human computers that processed information faster than their hardware permitted. The veteran's 4 arms moved restlessly. At first, our commanders thought humans were getting help from some unknown ally, some advanced species we didn't know about. But intelligence reports showed no evidence of outside assistance. Humans were doing this themselves. Juan leaned forward. How? They studied everything, Krikstal said simply. Every piece of coalition technology they captured, every weapon they took from our dead soldiers, every component they scavenged from destroyed ships. They took it apart, learned how it worked, then built it back better. The alien veteran's voice became bitter. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what they did with that knowledge. He finally picked up his drink, but held it without drinking. 3 months after New Busan, my unit was stationed on a coalition supply depot. We thought it was safe, deep inside coalition space, far from any human forces. But humans had somehow infiltrated the facility. Krixtal's voice grew quieter. They didn't attack us. They didn't try to destroy the depot. Instead, they left things for us to find. Personal items, pictures of their families, their children, their homes, little notes explaining who they were, why they were fighting. The veteran's claws scratched the table surface. One note was from a human engineer named Corporal Park. He had been working in our fuel processing facility for weeks, completely undetected. His note said he had a daughter named Sujin who was 7 years old. He wanted to go home to read her bedtime stories. Krixtal's voice cracked slightly. The note was attached to a detailed report about weaknesses in our fuel system. Weaknesses that Corporal Park could have exploited to destroy the entire depot. But he didn't. Instead, he just wanted us to know that he was a person, a father, who missed his child. The alien veteran was quiet for a moment. Most species, when they fight, try to make enemies seem less than people, make it easier to kill them. Humans did the opposite. They wanted us to understand exactly who we were fighting. Nixera shifted uncomfortably. Why would they do that? Because they knew something we didn't, Krixtal said. They knew that once. You see your enemy as a real person, it becomes harder to hate them. Harder to follow orders that cause unnecessary suffering. The veteran took a long drink. Corporal Park's infiltration lasted 18 days. 18 days where he could have killed hundreds of coalition soldiers or destroyed billions of credits worth of equipment. Instead, he spent his time learning our names, watching how we lived, understanding who we were as people. Krixtal's voice became very quiet. When he finally left, he disabled our fuel processing system in a way that would cause delays, but no casualties. He could have caused explosions that killed everyone on the base. Instead, he just made us late delivering supplies to the front lines. The alien looked directly at Juan. His final note said he hoped the war would end soon so everyone could go home to their families. He signed it, "Your enemy, Corporal Park." Krixtal finished his drink and set the glass down with trembling hands. That was when I realized humans weren't just fighting a military war. They were fighting a psychological war. Every interaction, every battle, every moment of contact was designed to make us question what we were doing. The veteran's 4 arms moved nervously. Other incidents followed. Human soldiers who could have killed coalition prisoners, but instead shared their food rations. Human medics who treated wounded coalition troops even when they were under fire. Human commanders who sent warnings before attacking civilian areas, giving non-combatants time to evacuate. Krixtal's voice became strained. Our officers told us it was psychological warfare. "Don't let them confuse you," they said. "They're still the enemy." But it was hard to think of humans as evil when they kept acting with more honor than some of our own commanders. The alien veteran looked around the cantina, as if checking to make sure no one was listening. The most disturbing incident happened 8 months into the war. A human ship was disabled during a space battle. Our rescue teams boarded to check for survivors. They found the ship's engineer, a young woman named Jin, still alive but badly injured. Krixtal's voice became barely audible. Jin was trapped under heavy debris. She was dying, and she knew it. Our medical officer, a Veltari named Kethra, wanted to help her. But standard procedure said to interrogate enemy prisoners first, provide medical aid second. The veteran's claws were leaving deep scratches in the table. Jin looked at Kethra and said, "You have kind eyes. I bet you became a medic because you want to help people." Then she gave him detailed information about the ship's self-destruct system. Information that saved the lives of our entire boarding party. Crixtal was quiet for a long time. She died while Kethra was trying to free her from the debris. Her last words were, "Tell my parents I tried to be good." Kethra broke regulations and held her hand while she died. The alien veteran looked up with tears in his large golden eyes. That night, Kethra sent in a report requesting transfer to non-combat duties. He said he couldn't fight people who were better than he was. Crixtal's voice was very small now. By the end of the first year, half our medical staff had made similar requests. Crixtal sat in silence for several minutes, staring at nothing. The cantina around them continued its normal business, but the alien veteran seemed lost in memories that still caused him pain. 1 year into the war, he finally said, Coalition. Intelligence believed they had figured out human strategy. Hide in the asteroid fields around their outer colonies. Launch hit-and-run attacks. Avoid direct fleet engagement at all costs. The veteran's voice was hollow, as if he was reading from an old report. Admiral Velsharn was frustrated. Humans were making the war expensive and embarrassing, but they weren't providing the decisive battle he needed to end things quickly. His superiors in Coalition Command were asking uncomfortable questions about why the war was taking so long. Crixtal picked up his empty glass and turned it over in his 4 hands, so the Admiral decided to force a confrontation. He would take the main Coalition battle fleet to Sol 4, the asteroid belt in the human home system, sweep it clean of human forces once and for all, end the war with one overwhelming victory. The alien veteran's golden eyes focused on something far away. I was assigned to the flagship for that operation, the CNS Dominator, biggest warship in the fleet, 3 miles long, crew of 50,000. The Admiral wanted maximum firepower for maximum impact. Crixtal's claws tapped nervously against his empty glass. We jumped into the Sol 4 system expecting to hunt down scattered human raiders hiding among the asteroids. Instead, we found the entire human navy waiting for us. His voice became quieter. Not hiding. Waiting. In perfect formation. Every ship they had, from tiny fighters to their largest battle cruisers. They had been there for days, maybe weeks, just waiting. Nixara leaned forward. How many ships? Less than 300, Crixtal said. We had over 2,000. It should have been a massacre, our favor. The veteran set down his glass and looked directly at Juan. Admiral Velsharn sent the usual surrender demand. You are outnumbered. 7-1. He told them. This is your last chance to save your crews. The human response came back immediately. Crixtal's voice became very quiet. It was from Admiral Kim, the human fleet commander. He said, "Thank you for bringing so many targets to one place. This will save us time." The alien veteran's 4 arms moved restlessly. The Admiral laughed when he heard that. "Targets?" he said. "They think we're the targets?" He ordered the fleet to advance in standard formation. Overwhelming firepower, textbook tactics. There was no way humans could win. Crixtal was silent for a moment, remembering. The first sign something was wrong came from our sensors. The asteroids around us were moving, not drifting randomly like asteroids should, moving with purpose, in coordinated patterns. The veteran's voice became strained. Our science officer ran analysis on the asteroid movement. "Admiral," she said, "those aren't asteroids. They're camouflaged human ships." Crixtal's claws scratched the table surface. Hundreds of them, hidden among the real asteroids, using camouflage so perfect our sensors couldn't tell the difference. The humans hadn't been waiting for us. They had been surrounding us. The alien veteran's voice cracked slightly. Admiral Velsharn realized he had led his entire fleet into a trap, but he was an experienced commander. "All ships, defensive formation," he ordered. "Prepare for 360-degree engagement." It was the right tactical response. Crixtal picked up his glass again, even though it was empty. But humans didn't attack the way the Admiral expected. Instead of charging at our formation with guns blazing, they started dancing. Juan frowned. Dancing? That's what it looked like, the veteran explained. Human ships darting between asteroids like they were performing some elaborate dance. Moving in patterns that made no sense, taking no direct action against our fleet. Krixtal's voice became more agitated. For 20 minutes, humans just danced around us. Our gunners couldn't get clear shots. Every time they targeted a human ship, it would disappear behind an asteroid. The Admiral was getting angry. Why won't they fight? He demanded. The alien veteran looked up with sad eyes. They were fighting. We just didn't understand how. While we were trying to track their ships, they were hurting us, using our own movements to push us exactly where they wanted us. Krixtal's voice became very quiet. I was on the bridge when our navigation officer realized what was happening. Admiral, he said, his voice full of fear, they're pushing us toward the star. The veteran was silent for a long moment. The human plan was brilliant and terrible. They had calculated the exact gravitational effects of the system's star on our large fleet. Every time we turned to engage their ships, we were pulled slightly closer to the star's gravity well. Krixtal's 4 arms trembled. By the time we understood what they were doing, it was almost too late. Half our fleet was caught in the star's gravity. We couldn't escape without abandoning those ships. The alien veteran's voice became hollow. That was when Admiral Kim's flagship broke from the asteroid field, the CNH Incheon, a human battle cruiser, less than half the size of our flagship. It came straight at us on a collision course. Krixtal stared at his empty glass. Admiral Velsharn couldn't believe what he was seeing. They're going to ram us, he said. A suicide attack. He ordered evasive maneuvers, but the Dominator was too big, too slow. The veteran's voice became barely audible. I was watching the human ship approach on the main screen. It was damaged, trailing atmosphere, clearly dying. But it kept coming, and then I saw Admiral Kim on her bridge. Krixtal looked up at Juan with tears in his golden eyes. She was looking right at us through the view screen. Not angry, not afraid, just determined. Like this was exactly what she had planned to do. Like she was proud of it. The alien veteran's voice broke. The Incheon hit us just below the command section. The impact tore through 12 decks, killed thousands of coalition soldiers. But that wasn't the worst part. Krixtal was crying now, tears streaming down his face. The worst part was that Admiral Kim could have targeted our engines, our weapons, our life support. She could have crippled or destroyed the Dominator completely. Instead, she aimed for the section where we kept our prisoners of war. The veteran's voice was barely a whisper. She died to save the lives of captured coalition soldiers. People who were supposed to be her enemies. Krixtal wiped his eyes with one of his 4 hands. After the collision, the human fleet vanished back into the asteroids. They had achieved their objective. Our fleet was damaged, demoralized, and half-trapped by the star's gravity. We had to spend hours extricating ourselves. The alien veteran looked around the cantina, as if seeing it for the first time. When we finally escaped the gravity well and regrouped, we counted our losses. 47 ships destroyed or heavily damaged. 12,000 casualties. The humans had lost maybe 30 ships. Krixtal's voice became bitter. But the real loss was something else. Something harder to count. For the first time in coalition history, a fleet under Admiral Velsharn had been beaten. Not just defeated, outmaneuvered, outsmarted, and sent running. The veteran picked up his empty glass and stared into it. News of the Battle of Sol 4 spread across the galaxy in days. Every species under coalition rule heard the story. The mighty coalition fleet, running from a handful of human ships. Krixtal's voice became very quiet. That was the beginning of the end for us. Not because humans had won one battle, but because they had shown everyone else that the coalition could be beaten. He looked directly at Juan. And they had shown us something else. something that would haunt coalition forces for the rest of the war. The alien veteran's voice was barely audible. They had shown us that dying for something you believe in can be more powerful than living to serve something you fear. Krixtal signaled for another drink, his fifth since beginning his story. The alien veteran's hands were shaking badly now, and Juan noticed that several other patrons in the cantina had been listening quietly to the conversation. 18 months. Into the war, Krixtal began, his voice hollow. Coalition Command decided that fighting honorably wasn't working. These humans don't understand civilized warfare, they said. Perhaps it's time to teach them the consequences of resistance. The veteran waited for his drink to arrive before continuing. The new strategy was called total pacification. No more trying to minimize civilian casualties, no more following the usual rules of war. Just complete destruction of human resistance by any means necessary. Krixtal took a long drink, his golden eyes staring at nothing. I was transferred to the 12th Assault Legion under Commander Thexlar. Our orders were simple. Clear human colonies completely. No prisoners unless they had intelligence value. No mercy for anyone providing aid to human military forces. The alien veteran's forearms moved restlessly. The first target was New Sol, a human farming colony with maybe 50,000 people. Intelligence said there was a small human garrison. There, no more than a few hundred soldiers. Should be an easy victory to build momentum for the new strategy. Krixtal's voice became quieter. When we arrived at New Sol, the colony tried to surrender immediately. The planetary governor, an elderly human named Mayor Cho, sent us a message offering full cooperation in exchange for protection of civilian lives. The veteran scratched deep grooves in the table with his claws. Commander Thexlar rejected the surrender. Intelligence indicates this colony has been supporting human military operations, he announced. All residents are considered enemy combatants. Krixtal was quiet for a moment, gathering courage to continue. It wasn't true. New Sol was just a farming community. They grew food, raised livestock, lived quiet lives. But Thexlar needed a clear victory to prove the new strategy worked. The alien veteran's voice cracked. The assault began at dawn. We came down in dropships, expecting organized resistance from those few hundred soldiers. Instead, we found terrified families hiding in their homes. Krixtal couldn't look at Juan or Nixara as he spoke. There were no soldiers. The human garrison had evacuated 3 days earlier, taking only their weapons and equipment. They left the civilians behind, because they knew the coalition didn't usually target non-combatants. The veteran took another drink with trembling hands. But the new rules said civilians supporting the enemy were legitimate targets, and growing food that might feed human soldiers counted as support. Krixtal's voice became barely audible. The massacre took 6 hours. 6 hours of going door to door, building to building. Most of the colonists didn't even try to resist. They just looked at us with confused, frightened eyes and asked what they had done wrong. The alien veteran was crying again, tears streaming down his face. I remember one house near the center of town. A small family, mother, father, 2 children. The father tried to shield his family with his body when we broke down their door. The mother was holding a baby who couldn't have been more than a year old. Krixtal's voice broke completely. The little girl, maybe 6 years old, stepped out from behind her parents. She had huge brown eyes and she was wearing a yellow dress with flowers on it. She looked up at me and asked, "Are you here to help us?" The veteran couldn't continue for several minutes. He just sat there, crying silently while Juan and Nixara waited. "I couldn't do it," Krixtal finally whispered. I looked at that little girl in her yellow dress, asking if I was there to help, and I couldn't pull the trigger. The alien veteran wiped his eyes with shaking hands. Commander Thexlar was watching from the doorway. When he saw me hesitate, he pushed me aside and completed the mission himself, all of them, the whole family. Krixtal's voice became hollow. But I wasn't the only one who hesitated. Across the colony, coalition soldiers were breaking. Some refused orders completely. Others completed their missions but broke down afterward. A few actually turned their weapons on their own officers. The veteran stared at his drink without touching it. By the end of that day, we had killed 47,000 civilians. Men, women, children, elderly, everyone. New Sol was completely empty. A perfect example of total pacification. Krixtal's voice was full of bitterness. Commander Thexelar sent a glowing report to Coalition Command. Mission accomplished, he wrote. Human resistance eliminated. Colony secured. He recommended the same strategy for other human settlements. The alien veteran looked around the cantina as if seeing the other patrons for the first time. But something had changed in our unit. Soldiers who had been eager for battle before New Sol became quiet, distant. Many stopped eating regularly. Some had nightmares every night. A few started talking about requesting transfers. Krixtal's four arms trembled as he spoke. 3 days after New Sol, we received intelligence about a human supply convoy. Easy target, just a few transport. Ships with minimal escort. Another chance to prove that total pacification was working. The veteran's voice became strained. When we intercepted the convoy, we found something unexpected. The transport ships were carrying medical supplies and food rations, but also something else. Recordings. Krixtal looked directly at Juan with haunted eyes. Thousands of recordings. Messages from human civilians to coalition soldiers. People from colonies that had already been destroyed sending final messages to the troops who had killed their families. The alien veteran's voice cracked. They weren't messages of hatred or revenge. They were messages of forgiveness. Humans who had lost everything, asking coalition soldiers to remember that they had been people with hopes and dreams and families. Krixtal was quiet for a long moment. One recording was from Mayor Cho, the governor of New Sol. He had made it the night before our attack. To the coalition soldiers who will kill us tomorrow, he said, I want you to know that we don't hate you. We know you have families too. We know you're following orders. We forgive you. The veteran couldn't continue speaking. He just sat there, tears flowing freely. That recording broke something inside our unit, Krixtal finally whispered. Here were people forgiving us for things we hadn't even done yet, understanding us better than we understood ourselves. The alien veteran looked up with red, swollen eyes. Half our soldiers requested transfers after hearing those recordings. The other half started questioning everything. Why were we fighting this war? What were we trying to accomplish? Was this really what coalition civilization was supposed to represent? Krixtal finished his drink in one swallow. Commander Thexelar tried to maintain discipline. These are psychological warfare tactics, he told us. The humans are trying to confuse you, make you weak. Don't listen to enemy propaganda. The veteran's voice became bitter. But it wasn't propaganda. It was just truth. Human truth. The kind of truth that makes you realize you've been living a lie. Krixtal looked around the cantina again, as if searching for something he couldn't find. After New Sol, coalition forces won dozens of battles. We destroyed human colonies, captured human ships, eliminated human resistance cells. By every military measure, total pacification was succeeding. The alien veteran's voice became very quiet, but we were losing the war. Every victory cost us more than we gained. Every dead human colony produced recordings, messages, final statements that spread throughout the coalition military. Every successful mission left our soldiers more damaged, more questioning, more broken. Krixtal stared at his empty glass. 6 months after New Sol, my entire unit was declared unfit for combat duty due to psychological casualties. We had won every battle we fought, but we couldn't fight anymore. The veteran looked directly at Juan. That was when I learned the most important lesson about fighting humans. You can kill their bodies, destroy their cities, eliminate their resistance. but you can't kill their effect on you. Krixtal's voice was barely a whisper. They change. You just by existing. And once you've been changed by humans, you can never go back to what you were before. Krixtal sat in silence for several minutes after finishing his previous story. The cantina had grown quieter around them, as if other patrons were also affected by the weight of his memories. When he finally spoke again, his voice carried a different tone. Not just sadness, but something like wonder. 2 years into the war, he began, something happened that Coalition Command never expected, something that changed everything. The alien veteran's golden eyes seemed to focus on something far away. I was assigned to a new unit after my psychological evaluation, the 23rd Reconnaissance Battalion, commanded by Captain Vexhan. We were considered reliable, soldiers who could still follow orders despite what we had seen. Krixtal's forearms moved nervously as he continued. Our mission was to locate and eliminate a human resistance cell operating in the Kepler sector. Intelligence said they were disrupting supply lines, rescuing prisoners, and recruiting coalition defectors. The veteran paused, as if considering his words carefully. Defectors. That was the new word Coalition Command had started using. Soldiers who abandoned their posts, refused orders, or worst of all, actively helped human forces. The numbers were classified, but rumors said entire battalions had gone missing. Krixtal looked directly at Juan. Our unit was supposed to be different. We were handpicked for loyalty, tested for psychological stability, monitored constantly, for signs of wavering commitment. Captain Vexhan assured command that we could be trusted. The alien veteran's voice became quieter. The hunt for the resistance cell took us to a small asteroid mining station called Haven Point. Intelligence said humans had established a base there, using the mining tunnels as cover. Krixtal scratched the table with his claws, leaving deep grooves in the metal. When we arrived at Haven Point, we expected to find a typical human guerrilla operation. Hit-and-run attacks, improvised weapons, desperate tactics. Instead, we found something impossible. The veteran's voice carried a note of amazement. Coalition soldiers working alongside humans, not as prisoners or under duress, but as volunteers, fighting together against other coalition forces. Nixara leaned forward, her large eyes wide with interest. Coalition soldiers helping humans? 63 of them, Krixtal said, from 7 different species. They had deserted from various units over the past year and somehow found their way to this resistance cell. The alien veteran's voice became strained. Captain Vexhan couldn't believe what our scouts reported. Impossible, he said. Coalition soldiers don't betray the coalition. There must be some mistake. Krixtal picked up his empty glass and turned it over in his hands. We set up surveillance of the base, trying to understand what we were seeing. For 3 days, we watched coalition soldiers and humans working together, sharing meals, planning operations, treating each other's wounded. The veteran's voice cracked slightly. The most disturbing thing was how normal it looked. Not like prisoners and captors, not like enemies forced to cooperate. Like comrades. Krixtal was quiet for a moment, remembering. On the 4th day, something went wrong with our surveillance equipment. Private Nethro, one of our youngest soldiers, volunteered to get closer to the base for manual observation. The alien veteran's forearms trembled. Nethro was captured by a human patrol. We expected him to be interrogated, probably killed. Instead, they brought him to their base and offered him food and medical attention for a minor injury he had sustained. Krixtal's voice became very quiet. We could hear everything through his comm unit. The human medic who treated him was a woman named Jin. She asked about his family, his home world, why he had joined the coalition military. The veteran looked up with sad eyes. Nethro told her about his mate and their 2 hatchlings back on. Veltar Prime, how he had enlisted to earn enough credits for their education. How he missed them every day. Krixtal's claws left fresh scratches in the table. Jin listened to everything, then shared her own story. She had been a teacher before the war started. She had 36 students in her classroom, ages 6 to 12. She joined the resistance after coalition forces destroyed her school. The alien veteran's voice cracked. I don't want to fight, she told Nethro. I want to go home and teach children again. But I can't do that while the coalition is destroying everything I care about. Crixtal was quiet for several minutes, gathering courage to continue. The next morning, something unprecedented happened. Nethro contacted us on his comm unit and said he wasn't coming back. The veteran looked directly at Juan. I can't fight these people, he said. They're not monsters. They're not evil. They're just trying to protect their families, same as we are. Crixtal's voice became hollow. Captain Vexhan was furious. He declared Nethro a traitor and ordered an immediate assault on the base. We'll rescue him from whatever mind control the humans are using, he said. The alien veteran's forearms moved restlessly. But when we attacked Haven Point, something impossible happened again. The humans didn't just defend themselves. They defended Nethro, a coalition soldier who had been their prisoner for less than 2 days. Crixtal's voice was barely audible. I watched a human named Corporal Park throw himself in front of enemy fire to protect Nethro from his own unit. Park took 3 plasma bolts meant for a coalition soldier he had met yesterday. The veteran was crying again, tears streaming down his face. As Park was dying, he looked at Nethro and said, Tell your hatchlings their father is a good person. Crixtal couldn't continue for several minutes. He just sat there, weeping silently. That broke something inside our entire unit. He finally whispered. Here was a human dying to protect a coalition soldier, dying for someone who was supposed to be his enemy. The alien veteran wiped his eyes with shaking hands. The battle ended when half our unit stopped fighting. They just couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't shoot at people who were protecting coalition soldiers. Couldn't follow orders that made no sense. Crixtal's voice became very quiet. Captain Vexhan tried to restore order, but it was too late. Private Kethrin threw down his weapon and walked over to the human lines. Then Sergeant Moxtal did the same. Then Corporal Velak. The veteran looked around the cantina as if seeing it for the first time. Within an hour, 23 members of our unit had defected. Not because they were captured or coerced, but because they couldn't fight people who showed more honor than their own commanders. Crixtal's voice carried a note of wonder. The humans welcomed them. All of them. Fed them, treated their wounds, listened to their stories. No interrogation, no demands for intelligence, no attempts at conversion. The alien veteran picked up his empty glass again. I was one of the defectors. I couldn't go back to a military that ordered me to shoot people who were protecting my own soldiers. Crixtal looked directly at Juan with red, swollen eyes. The human resistance cell grew from 30 people to over 90 in a single day. Word spread through underground networks that coalition soldiers were joining human forces voluntarily. The veteran's voice became strained. Within 6 months, it was happening everywhere. Coalition units encountering humans who treated prisoners, better than Coalition Command treated its own troops. Soldiers seeing Coalition defectors fighting alongside humans as equals, not servants. Crixtal's forearms trembled. Coalition Command tried to stop the defections with threats, punishment, psychological conditioning. Nothing worked. Once soldiers saw that there was an alternative to blind obedience, many of them chose that alternative. The alien veterans' voice became bitter. The official reports blamed human mind control technology. Psychological warfare designed to corrupt coalition loyalty, they said. But we knew the truth. Crixtal looked up with haunted eyes. There was no mind control. There was just the simple realization that humans treated their enemies better than the coalition treated its allies. The veteran was quiet for a long moment. My resistance cell spent the next year working with human forces to rescue coalition prisoners, protect civilian populations, and undermine military operations that targeted non-combatants. Crixtal's voice became very quiet. I learned something important during that time. Humans didn't want coalition soldiers to switch sides because it gave them military advantage. They wanted us to switch sides because they believed everyone deserved the chance to choose their own path. The alien veteran looked around the cantina again. By the end of the second year, Coalition Command had lost effective control of nearly half its military forces, not to human conquest, but to human example. Crixtal's voice was barely a whisper. They showed us what we could be if we stopped being afraid. Crixtal sat quietly for a long time, staring at his empty glass. The cantina around them had grown very quiet, and Juan realized that most of the other patrons had been listening to the veteran's story. Some were wiping tears from their eyes. Others looked thoughtful, as if remembering their own experiences. The war ended not with surrender or victory, Crixtal finally said, his voice soft but clear. It ended with collapse. Complete, total collapse of Coalition authority. The alien veteran's golden eyes looked directly at Juan. 3 years and 4 months after first contact with humans, Coalition Command issued its final military order: immediate ceasefire and withdrawal to core territories. Not because they had been defeated in battle, but because they no longer had an army willing to fight. Crixtal's 4 arms moved slowly, as if he was very tired. Over 60% of Coalition military forces had either defected, refused orders, or simply walked away from their posts. Entire fleets declared independence. Whole sectors announced they were no longer part of the Coalition. The veteran's voice carried a note of amazement. Humans had never conquered a single Coalition world. They had never destroyed a major Coalition fleet. They had never even attempted to invade Coalition territory. But they had done something much more powerful. Crixtal picked up his empty glass one more time. They had given every soldier, every citizen, every species in the Coalition something they had never had before, the idea that they could say no. The alien veteran set down his glass and looked around the cantina. This place we're sitting in right now, Nexus Prime, didn't exist during the Coalition era. Independent trade stations were forbidden. All commerce had to go through Coalition-controlled ports, with Coalition taxes and Coalition regulations. Crixtal's voice became stronger. But after the human war, when Coalition authority collapsed, thousands of independent stations like this one were built. Places where different species could meet and trade freely without asking permission from anyone. The veteran gestured toward the other patrons in the cantina. Look around you. Veltari merchants trading with human freighter captains. Keldan, scientists sharing research with Threx engineers. Species that barely spoke to each other during Coalition rule now work together as equals. Crixtal's voice carried a note of wonder. The humans didn't just win their freedom. They accidentally started a revolution that spread across half the galaxy. Juan leaned forward. Accidentally? I don't think they planned it, Crixtal explained. They were just fighting for their own survival. But the way they fought, with honor, with mercy, with respect for their enemies, it showed everyone else what was possible. The alien veteran's voice became quieter. Other species saw humans refusing to surrender and asked themselves, why do we accept things we don't like? They saw humans treating prisoners with dignity and wondered, why don't our own leaders treat us this well? They saw humans willing to die for freedom and realized maybe some things are worth fighting for. Crixtal was quiet for a moment, remembering. Within 5 years of the war's end, over 200 species had declared independence from various empires and confederations, not just from the Coalition, from every major power in this part of the galaxy. The veteran looked directly at Nixara. Your own people, the Kethmari, were subjects of the hegemony for 3,000 years. What made you finally rebel? Nixara's large eyes blinked slowly. We heard stories about humans, about how they fought, about how they never gave up, even when facing impossible odds. Crixtal nodded. Exactly. Human influence spread like seeds on the wind. Most species never met humans directly, but the idea of humans, The possibility they represented gave everyone else courage to change their own situations. The alien veteran's voice became sad again. But it wasn't without cost. The collapse of the coalition meant chaos for billions of people. Trade routes disrupted, governments falling, local conflicts breaking out everywhere. Many species weren't ready for sudden freedom. Crixtal scratched the table with his claws, leaving familiar deep grooves. Some worlds descended into civil war. Others were conquered by opportunistic neighbors. A few actually requested to rejoin the coalition remnants, preferring familiar oppression to uncertain liberty. The veteran looked up with tired eyes. Freedom isn't easy. Humans knew that from their own history, but most other species had to learn it the hard way. Crixtal was quiet for several minutes, then reached into his belt pouch and pulled out the small device he had shown earlier. "This is why I'm finally telling this story," he said, activating the hologram above the table. The image showed a human woman in her 20s, standing with two small children. She had kind eyes and a gentle smile. Behind her was a garden full of flowers and vegetables. "Her name is Mira," Crixtal said softly. "She was 6 years old when I met her on New Soul Colony. She was wearing a yellow dress with flowers on it." The veteran's voice cracked. "She was the little girl who asked if I was there to help her. The one I couldn't kill?" Juan stared at the hologram, understanding dawning in his eyes. "She survived?" he asked. Crixtal nodded. "Somehow she hid during the massacre, maybe in a basement, maybe in the fields outside town. When human rescue ships arrived 3 days later, they found her alone among all the bodies. The alien veterans' 4 arms trembled. She spent the rest of the war in human refugee camps, lost her parents, her home, everyone she knew. But she survived." The hologram flickered and changed, showing the same woman as a child, then as a teenager, then as an adult. After the war, she became a teacher. Like Jin, the medic who had treated me so kindly. Mira wanted to help children learn and grow despite everything she had experienced. Crixtal's voice became stronger. 3 years ago, she tracked me down, through veteran networks, sent me a message saying she had been looking for the coalition soldier who had spared her life. She wanted to thank him. The alien veteran wiped tears from his eyes. "We've been corresponding ever since. She tells me about her students, her husband, her children. I tell her about my life after the war, my work here on Nexus Prime." Crixtal looked directly at Juan. "Last week, she sent me this recording with a message. She said it was time for both our peoples to know the complete truth about what happened. Not the official histories, not the propaganda, but the real story told by people who lived through it." The veteran turned off the hologram and put the device away. "She said humans had learned something important from the war, that enemies can become friends if they're willing to see each other as people first." Crixtal's voice became very quiet. "She also said something else. She said she hoped my story might help prevent future wars by showing that there's always a choice between hatred and mercy." The alien veteran looked around the cantina one more time. "So that's why I'm here talking to a human journalist and his alien colleague. Not because I want to relive painful memories, but because Mira is right. People need to know that even in the darkest times, even in the middle of war, individuals can choose to be better than their circumstances demand." Crixtal's 4 arms moved slowly as he prepared to stand. The human war taught the galaxy many things. That small groups can resist overwhelming power. That dying for freedom is better than living in chains. That treating enemies with dignity is more powerful than defeating them with violence. The veteran's voice became very strong. But the most important lesson was this: every person, in every moment, has the choice between causing harm and preventing it. Between following orders blindly and thinking for themselves. Between fear and courage. Crixtal stood up, his tall frame casting a shadow across the table. Humans didn't win the war because they were stronger or smarter or better equipped. They won because more of them chose courage more often than fear. The alien veteran reached into his pouch and pulled out some credits to pay for his drinks. And once the rest of us saw what courage looked like, we started making the same choice. Crixtal looked directly at Juan with those large golden eyes. That's the real legacy of the human war. Not the military victories or the political changes or the new governments. It's the simple idea that anyone can choose to be brave, and that individual acts of bravery can change the entire galaxy. The veteran turned to leave, then paused and looked back. 15 years later, I still think about that little girl in the yellow dress every day. She asked if I was there to help her, and I couldn't answer yes at the time. But maybe, by telling this story, I finally can. Crixtal walked toward the cantina exit, but stopped when he heard movement behind him. Other patrons were standing up. Aliens from different worlds, different species, different backgrounds. Some were clearly veterans, bearing the same kind of scars that marked Crixtal's shell. Others looked like traders, engineers, or simple travelers. An old Keldan with cybernetic implants raised his glass. "To the humans," he said in a voice roughened by age, "who showed us that courage is contagious." A young Threx female joined him. "To the coalition soldiers who chose mercy over orders." One by one, others throughout the cantina stood and raised their drinks. Humans and aliens together, sharing a moment of remembrance for a war that had changed everything.